My name is Tiffany Reed, and I'm 30 years old. I used to believe that if you worked hard, loved harder, and stayed loyal, things would eventually fall into place. Turns out, life doesn't care how hard you try when you're with the wrong person. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of night that feels ordinary right up until it ruins your peace. My boyfriend Aaron sat me down on the couch we'd picked out together, the same one where we'd eaten takeout and watched bad movies on rainy nights. His voice was calm, too calm, and his words rehearsed. I just feel like I need space to explore myself, to nurture my creative energy, he said, eyes steady on mine, like he was reading lines off an invisible script. I didn't say a word. He was an artist, or at least that's what he called himself. In practice, it meant he spent 3 days a week at a coffee shop, doodling on his tablet and talking about the novel he might write someday. The rest of the time, he floated between exhibitions, claiming inspiration from the chaos of existence. Meanwhile, I ran a small but busy auto restoration shop, fixing up classic cars, breathing life into machines everyone else had given up on. My hands were always stained with grease, my nails never quite clean. To him and his art school friends, that made me simple, practical, reliable, they'd say with that patronizing tone that always sounded like boring. That night, as Aaron kept talking about creative freedom and emotional evolution, I realized something. He wasn't breaking up with me because he was unhappy. He was doing it because he thought he was better than me. He leaned forward, his expression soft and self-satisfied. "You'll understand one day," he said, touching my knee. "We'll always be friends, though, right?" The way he said it, like he was offering me a prize for good behavior, made something inside me go still. In that silence, something clicked. My heart didn't shatter, it hardened. I gave him a slow, steady smile. Absolutely. Relief washed over his face. He truly thought he'd managed a graceful escape, that I'd stay orbiting around his life, ready to patch his tires and pay half the rent when his creative phase ran long. But I wasn't his mechanic anymore. I stood up, and for the first time in weeks, I felt taller than him. "As your new friend," I said, keeping my tone smooth, "you might want to start looking for a roommate to cover my part of the rent. I'll be moving out this weekend." His jaw slackened. "Wait, what? You're moving out?" "I am." He blinked fast, panic starting to break through his enlightened calm. "But, Tiffany, that's ridiculous. Where are you even going to go?" "I'm not sure yet," I said, "but I'll figure it out. You're the one who wanted freedom. I'm just giving it to you." He stared at me, stunned, like a man watching his safety net dissolve before his eyes. "You can't just leave. The lease is in both our names." "You're right," I said, my voice even, "which is why I'll pay my half through the end of the month. That gives you about 3.5 weeks to find a new roommate, or we can break the lease together. A $2,000 penalty, split evenly. Your choice." His mouth opened, then closed. The math was already spinning in his head. His artistic soul didn't have $1,000 lying around. "Tiff, come on, be reasonable. You can't just—" "I can," I said quietly, and this time he heard the finality in my voice. He looked lost, and for a flicker of a second, I almost felt sorry for him, but that moment passed quickly. This wasn't heartbreak, it was clarity. When I started packing, he followed me around the apartment, cycling through the 5 stages of manipulation: confusion, guilt, anger, nostalgia, and finally desperation. "You're really just going to throw away 2 years?" he demanded. "As your friend," I replied, keeping my tone painfully polite, "I think it's important to focus on the future, not the past." He groaned. "Don't do that. Don't act like this doesn't mean anything to you." I paused, folded a shirt, and looked up at him. It meant something. Past tense. His expression faltered, and for once, he didn't have a rehearsed line ready. That's when Mia, our third roommate, came home. She was a veterinary technician, quiet and perpetually tired from her 12-hour shifts. She took one look at Aaron's tear-streaked face, my suitcase, and sighed. "Don't tell me," she said, her voice flat. "His art supplies exploded again?" "Worse," I said. "He's decided we'll be better off as friends." Mia raised an eyebrow at Aaron, unimpressed. "Friends? Huh." She nodded slowly, then turned and disappeared into her room, shutting the door behind her. The silence that followed was brutal. Aaron stared after her, then at me. "You can't just leave me here alone with her. She hates me." "Then I guess you'll finally have something in common," I said, zipping up my bag. That weekend, I loaded my boxes into my old pickup, the same one he used to call a relic. As I took one last look at the apartment, I realized I didn't feel sadness, just peace. He stood at the doorway, arms crossed, trying to look composed. "You'll regret this," he said. I smiled, the kind of smile that hides a storm. Maybe, or maybe I'll finally breathe. Then I left. No dramatic goodbye, no tears, just the hum of the engine and the quiet promise forming in my head. If he wanted friendship, I'd give it to him, but not the kind he expected. Because friendship, like any good engine, runs on balance, and Aaron was about to learn what happens when one side stops carrying the load. The first week after I left felt like stepping off a boat that had been slowly taking on water. The ground was steady, but my legs still remembered the sway. My new place was a half-renovated studio that smelled like sawdust and possibility. I stacked boxes against a wall and slept on a mattress on the floor, listening to the buzz of the old refrigerator like it was a lullaby for people who had finally chosen themselves. On Thursday night, my phone lit up with Aaron's name. I stared at it until the ring cut out. 30 seconds later, it lit again. I answered. "Tiffany." "Thank God," he whispered. "The power just went out, and the internet's dead. Everything's dark. You know the breaker box thing. Can you come fix it?" "The breaker box is in the hallway utility closet," I said, perfectly calm. "Find the switch that's out of alignment and flip it back." A beat of silence. What if I get electrocuted? I can't see anything. You always handled this." "As your friend," I said, the smile audible in my voice, "I'm concerned for your safety. The fastest solution is the emergency maintenance number on the fridge. They're on call 24/7. "They charge for that," he said, small as a child. "They might, but your comfort is worth it, right?" I let the quiet sit for a second. "You've got this, Aaron." I hung up before he could decide my confidence was a lifeline he could climb. It kept happening. A message about his car making a strange noise. A voicemail about his sink backing up. A text at 2:11 a.m. "Are you awake? I can't sleep. Can we talk?" In the past, I'd have been there with a wrench, a drain snake, or a cup of chamomile tea. Now, I offered friendly, non-interventionist advice. A reputable mechanic. A plumber with decent rates. A meditation app. It wasn't cruelty, it was a boundary. But boundaries, to the people who used to benefit from your lack of them, feel like betrayal. The next afternoon, I got a text from our third roommate, MIA. That's what everyone called him. But it wasn't a girl's name. It was a nickname from his initials, Miles Ian Archer. MIA. He wore it like armor and a joke at once. "You out?" he wrote. "Yeah. Lease paid through end of month." "Your circus now," I replied. "Not my circus. Just my shift schedule and a terrier with separation anxiety." "Buster still eating socks?" He's a connoisseur. I could picture Miles's face, the tired smile that looked like it had grown out of a long winter, the quick eyes that missed nothing and judged no one. He was a veterinary technician who worked 12-hour days and came home smelling vaguely of antiseptic and dog shampoo. He'd perfected the art of non-engagement with Aaron months before I ever tried. Over the next 2 weeks, our messages became a kind of field report. Miles would text when Aaron debuted a fresh crisis. I'd respond with a dry one-liner and a practical solution Aaron probably wouldn't use. "He posted a roommate ad," Miles wrote one night. "Reads like he's auditioning for a wife with rent. Requirements? Clean, quiet, financially stable, willing to help with household tasks, flexible about guests, supportive of artistic pursuits." So, pay the bills, do the chores, clap on cue. There are emojis. Of course there are. I laughed alone in my studio, then turned that laugh into a long breath. How many ways had I been clapping on cue without realizing I was the soundtrack? On the third week, the tempo changed. Miles texted at 9:46 p.m. "You up?" "More or less." "Buster's not eating." Lethargic, gums pale. I can't tell if I'm overreacting. Emergency clinics across town. I don't want to take a bus and shake him up more. "I'm on my way," I typed, without thinking. The clinic's waiting room was lit like morning in a train station. The coffee machine complained every time someone touched it. A poster about flea prevention hung crooked, as if the wall had shrugged. Miles sat with Buster bundled in a soft towel, hands steady in that way, of men who have worked too many crisis shifts. "Hey," he said quietly when I entered. Up close, his eyes were greener than I remembered, tired but clear. "Thanks." "Of course." I crouched and scratched Buster's head. He blinked at me, embarrassed to be sick. You ate another sock, didn't you, sir? Miles huffed a small laugh. He swears he didn't. We waited 3 hours. We talked about nothing and everything. The way engines remember neglect, the way animals forgive it, the relief of tasks with clear endings, the ache of tasks that never end. At some point, he asked gently, You okay? I'm fine, I said. Then I added, because the truth was easier with someone who didn't fish for it. I'm learning the difference between being needed and being used. He nodded, something like respect moving across his face. That's a hard lesson. Worth it, but hard. The vet finally came out with a sheepish grin. Sock, she said, holding up a small plastic bag containing the offending object. A teal one. He'll be okay. Miles exhaled so slowly it sounded like a quiet prayer. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath too until my lungs burned. Outside, the air was weirdly sweet, like rain flirting with the idea of falling. I opened the truck's passenger door. Buster scrambled in and immediately curled into a satisfied comma. Let me drive you home, I said. He'll like the ride. Miles didn't argue. In the quiet cab, Buster snored softly, and streetlights wiped gold across the windshield in steady intervals. I thought about the rhythm of things that keep you alive. Engines, heartbeats, boundaries. At the apartment, Miles hesitated. Do you want to come up? I've got... He paused, and a smile tugged. Tea that tastes like hay and despair. Sold, I said. The living room hadn't changed much. Aaron's canvases leaned against the walls like eavesdropping ghosts. A diffuser breathed eucalyptus. There was a new dent in the coffee table. I didn't ask. We sat at the kitchen counter with mugs that said, World's Okayest Roommate. Miles leaned his elbows on the laminate, his forearms mapped with faint scratches from cats who didn't appreciate vaccines. I know you keep it light with him, he said, nodding toward the closed hallway where Aaron's room sat, blue light pulsing under the door. It's not my business, but I've seen you patch the world every time it leaks. I just hope you're letting it leak a little. I watched the steam curl from my mug and vanish. I'm trying. Sometimes the leak sounds like failure. Sometimes it sounds like honesty, he said. Then he looked at me fully, not politely, not like he was borrowing my gaze. You left. That's a hard thing. Good hard. Something opened in my chest that wasn't grief. It wasn't triumph either. It was a small, surprising quiet. The kind you hear right before a good song begins. A door opened down the hall. Aaron emerged, blinking at the sight of me like I'd walked out of a movie he'd paused. Tiff? He looked from me to Miles, to the empty tea mugs. He composed his face into concern. Is Buster okay? He'll live, Miles said. Aaron nodded and made himself smaller, more boyish, like someone who wanted a chocolate bar after bedtime. I'm glad you're here, he told me. I couldn't sleep. I was thinking, maybe we should talk. About us. About how we defined friendship too quickly. A line from an old manual flashed in my mind. Misfires don't fix themselves when you whisper nice things at the spark plugs. As your friend, I said, calm enough to be cruel, I think you should get some rest. We can talk about roommates, budgets, and the maintenance hotline in the morning. He flinched at maintenance hotline like the words were insects. Right, he said. Sure. He retreated. The door latch caught, soft as an apology. Miles washed the mugs like it was just past any other midnight. He didn't ask what Aaron had expected. I didn't say what I'd refused for the first time. We stood there in the gentle clatter of plates and found that we were not alone in a kitchen at all. We were in a truce between old stories and new ones. By the end of the month, Aaron's roommate ad had yielded exactly 0 applicants. He tried rewording it. He tried lowering the rent by $50 and calling it a creative household discount. He tried listing perks that included access to curated vinyls and intimate salon nights, which made it sound like you'd be paying to clap for him on Tuesdays. I kept paying my half until the 30th, just like I'd promised. He sent a flurry of messages as the deadline approached. It's not decent to leave me like this. We had a life. You don't have to be cold. You're punishing me. Please. I drafted replies and deleted them, not because I was afraid of saying the wrong thing, but because silence was finally, blessedly, an available tool in my box. On the last evening of the month, I stopped by with the building manager to sign the release that would lift my name from the lease like a sticker finally pride-free. Miles met me in the lobby with Buster under his arm, the dog wearing a cone like a tiny satellite dish. He'd gone after another sock, learned nothing. Ready? Miles asked. Very, I said. Upstairs, Aaron met us in the living room, performatively cheerful. A new guy sat on the couch, knees together, eyes wide. A grad student, by the look of the backpack and the haunted expression. Papers were spread on the coffee table. The release, a new lease, a list of shared expectations, printed in neat bullet points that read like a recipe for resentment. I signed my name with the hand that didn't shake. The pen line settled like a road finally finished. New chapter, Aaron declared, too loudly. Everything happens for a reason. Miles stood beside me, steady, not touching. He didn't need to. The steadiness traveled anyway. Aaron watched my face as I handed the pen to the manager. There was something wild at the edges of his eyes, a realization arriving late to its own party. He looked down at my hands, the hands that had fixed his car, tightened his shelves, stirred his soup when he was sick, and then at the space where those hands no longer belonged. For a second, his mask slipped. Behind it, I saw the truth. He had not expected freedom to be this expensive. Good luck, I said. I meant it. I just didn't mean it for me. The elevator doors closed on the three of us, me, Miles, and a dog who kept trying to lick his cone, and I felt the cord snap clean. Tea? Miles asked when we reached the lobby. Only if it tastes marginally less like hay, I said. We can negotiate, he answered, and there was that small quiet again, like the space before a chorus. Outside, the sky finally chose rain. It came down straight and honest, washing the city in the one thing even liars can't fake: wait. I stepped into it and didn't run. It's strange how silence can sound different depending on who you share it with. With Aaron, silence was heavy, the kind that filled the room until it pressed against your chest. With Miles, it was light, almost companionable, like we both understood that words were optional when the air was already honest. Weeks passed after the lease signing. My business was steady, a mix of break jobs, tune-ups, and the occasional dream project, an old Mustang that a widower wanted restored in memory of his wife. Working with my hands grounded me. The steady rhythm of tightening bolts, the smell of engine oil. It all reminded me that some things can still run perfectly after being broken, as long as someone cares enough to rebuild them. One Friday, I stopped by the clinic where Miles worked to drop off a custom-built pet ramp he'd asked for. Buster had sprained his leg jumping off the couch. When Miles saw me carrying it through the door, he smiled in that quiet, grateful way that made people feel seen without being studied. "You built that already?" he asked. "I had the parts lying around," I said, setting the ramp beside the counter. "Besides, your client's got VIP status." "Buster's spoiled," he said. "He thinks the world owes him treats." "Then he's just taking after his owner," I teased. He laughed. That low, tired laugh that still carried warmth. It was the sound of someone learning how to be happy again. We didn't plan it, but after that day, we started seeing each other more. Lunch breaks turned into coffee runs. Coffee runs turned into dinner. Dinner turned into staying late, just to talk about everything we used to hide. He told me about the loneliness of coming home from the clinic to an empty apartment, the way his job made him see endings every day and forced him to stay gentle anyway. I told him about my father, who taught me to fix things because you shouldn't wait for someone else to save what you can repair yourself. And somewhere between stories, the quiet between us changed shape. It wasn't friendship anymore, it was recognition. 2 months after I left Aaron, I was at Miles's apartment, half asleep on the couch while Buster snored between us, when my phone lit up again. Aaron. For a second, I considered ignoring it. Then curiosity got the better of me. "Hey," I answered. He hesitated. "I didn't think you'd pick up." "You caught me in a generous mood." He laughed, hollow. "Funny. That used to mean something else." There was a pause long enough for me to hear him breathing through the receiver. Then softer. "I just wanted to say, I miss talking to you. Everything feels off. The new guy, he left, took his stuff in the middle of the night." I glanced at Miles, who raised an eyebrow. I mouthed, "New roommate bailed." He mouthed back, shocking. On the phone, Aaron kept talking. "The apartment feels empty. I thought this would be liberating, but I just feel stuck. Maybe I made a mistake." I closed my eyes for a moment. There it was again, the old reflex. The part of me that wanted to soothe, to fix, to fill the gaps he'd carved. But that part of me had retired. "As your friend," I said carefully, "I think maybe this is what freedom feels like when you finally get what you asked for." He went quiet. I imagined him sitting in that apartment, surrounded by his half-finished canvases and unpaid bills. I imagined him realizing that being the main character in your own story doesn't mean much if you keep rewriting everyone else out of theirs. I hope you find what you're looking for, Aaron, I said gently. Really, I do. Before he could reply, I ended the call. Miles watched me for a moment, then said, "Closure?" "Reality check," I said. He nodded. "Same thing sometimes." A year passed. Seasons changed like slow breaths, one long exhale of relief. Miles and I bought a small house on the edge of town. It wasn't perfect. The fence leaned, the plumbing moaned, and the paint peeled, but it was ours. He built a small garden out back, and I turned the garage into a full workshop. On quiet afternoons, I'd work with the door open, the scent of cut grass drifting in while Buster barked at butterflies like they were trespassers. We never made a grand declaration about being together. It just became true, the way morning light slowly fills a room. He didn't need saving. Neither did I. We just kept showing up, honest, tired, and willing. Sometimes we'd talk about Aaron, not in bitterness, but in that curious tone people use when remembering an old dream that once felt real. "I heard from a client that he moved back to his parents' place," Miles said one evening. "Small town 3 hours out. Guess the city didn't love him back." I just nodded. He always thought freedom meant not needing anyone. Turns out needing no one is just another kind of cage. He looked at me. "And you?" I used to think strength meant fixing everything. Now I think it's knowing what's not mine to fix. He smiled, that quiet, steady smile that told me he understood. Sometimes, late at night, when the world outside was still, I'd think about that first night on the couch, the moment Aaron told me we'd always be friends. He thought friendship meant keeping me close enough to use, but far enough not to owe. He thought walking away would make him free, when all it did was unchain me. My revenge was never about hurting him. It was about not being what he expected anymore. I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped building them for people who wouldn't cross back. I found love again. Quiet, kind, and real. I built a life that didn't need to prove itself to anyone, and maybe that's the most satisfying ending there is. Not the dramatic collapse, not the loud victory, just the steady hum of a life rebuilt by your own hands. The kind of peace that comes when you finally understand you can't fix people, but you can build something beautiful once you stop trying to fix what refuses to run.